All right, we're just about ready to begin. My name is Bridgette Baker, and I'll be your producer for this evening's event. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items to review. This evening's webinar is being recorded and broadcast live on Facebook, and we are encouraging you to share the event with your social media friends or start a watch party and invite others to join. If this is your first time using the Zoom platform, on the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see your main toolbar that has, among other things, audio settings, etc. You'll also find the Q&A button at the very bottom of the toolbar. And although we won't be answering your questions in real time tonight, do feel free to use the Q&A button throughout the presentation to pose your questions, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of the discussion. On the toolbar towards the right, you'll find the chat function, and we highly encourage you to use the chat function to express your thoughts on any of the topics we'll discuss tonight. This evening's discussion forum was designed for you after all, so we encourage you to remain attentive and participate as much as possible via the chat and Q&A functions. I do thank you for your attention during our housekeeping review. I now hand the floor over to Mia Johnson, National Health Committee Chair for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Inc.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome and introduce to you all Virginia W. Harris, National President, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Incorporated. President Harris was re-elected for a second term, October 12, 2019. Having served as a member for 29 years in several leadership positions, she has consistently demonstrated her leadership abilities through successfully serving at both the national and local chapter levels. President Harris' stellar work and staunch commitment has earned her numerous national, regional, state, and local awards. And now you will hear from President Harris and Mariko Bennett, First Vice President of NCBW, Washington, D.C. chapter.
Thank you, Mia, President Johnson, for that very kind introduction. It is my honor to bring greetings on behalf of the National Directorate and all of the activist women in our 61 chapters in 27 states that comprise the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. NCBW was founded in 1981 in New York City and is a 38-and-a-half-year-old advocacy organization whose vision is that Black women and girls will live in a world where socioeconomic inequality does not exist. COVID-19 has taken all of us by surprise, but we are not on hold. The world of politics and decision affecting us has not stopped, and neither should we. This is the time to speak up, speak out, and take action. Considering that Black women lead over half of the household in the Black community, their health and well-being are of the utmost importance. Not only being African-American, but standing strong as African-American women, we have to fight twice as hard to ensure our voices are heard. We are battling a system that was never designed to protect us. It is up to us to invoke the change we hope to see and mold the next group of leaders that come after us. It is imperative that we not only realize the power in our voice, but help others in our communities do the same. The Black vote is crucial in 2020 presidential election. They know it, and we know it too. We cannot wait nor rely on the system to fix itself. We must take action. We must have the conversation, and we must protect our vote. The future is in our hands. Thank you.
Greetings. Advocacy is the core of NCBW's mission, and we are well positioned to help educate and engage active and potential voters leading up to the presidential election in November 2020. We all can play a part by organizing registration drives, hosting virtual voter education events, communicating via email, text, and more with family, friends, and colleagues about the mail-in ballot guidance and deadlines. NCBW is focus-driven to advance resolutions aligned with our mission and vision. We are striving to improve Black women's health by confronting racially biased practices and attitudes in healthcare, promoting heart-healthy lifestyle changes, and centering the importance of mental health. We are expanding opportunities for education by increasing enrollment and graduation at HBCUs, in addition to supporting economic empowerment by advocating for safe and stable housing, and implementing Sisternomics as a means for financial sustainability. Our individual and collective efforts can get us closer to the change we desperately need, and closer to a more just and equitable future for Black women and girls. As agents of civic change, remember this: we are dreamers, leaders, fighters, and change makers. Own your vote, own your voice, and own your power. Together, we will accomplish our mission. Now, I would like to turn it over to Rhonda Williams Turner.
Hello, everyone. It is with great pleasure to introduce Monica Kaufman Pearson, Emmy Award winning journalist and former retired anchor on WSB TV. Monica is the first woman and first minority to anchor the daily evening news in Atlanta, Georgia, where she worked for 37 years at the leading station. She has freelanced at KISS 104.1 FM and hosted a public affairs show. She also is one of the 3 hosts of the Emmy-nominated Georgia Public Broadcasting show called A Seat at the Table, and has become a radio and television spokesperson for businesses and institutions nationally. Welcome, Monica. Now I will turn it over to VP Tinsley.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Senator Kamala D. Harris. Senator Harris is a lifelong public servant and civil rights leader. She was the first African-American and first woman to serve as Attorney General of California, and the second African-American woman to be elected to the United States Senate in history. She is well respected and has received countless honors and acknowledgments for her work. Senator Harris's resume of accomplishments is extensive. Born in Oakland, California, Harris is a graduate of Howard University. She received her law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. She is married to Doug Emhoff. NCBW welcomes Senator Kamala D. Harris. And now I will turn it over to our moderator, Monica Kaufman Pearson.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Saritha. Well, Senator Harris, thank you so much for joining us today. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women is a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization. So in order to keep my job with them, I cannot ask any questions about presidential politics and the possibility of you being someone's running mate. Well, in 1984, New York Representative Geraldine Ferraro made history by being the first female vice presidential nominee of a major American political party. Back then, there were only 2 women in the US Senate, and now you are one of 26 women in the Senate and 101 women in the House. There are now 11 women governors. 2 of them, by the way, serve in the US territories of Puerto Rico and Guam. Now, when you look at the number of mayors in cities with populations of over 30,000, 22% of them are women. Now, we see that the numbers are growing, but what needs to be done for and by women to get more women into elective offices, especially since women make up almost 51% of the US population? Senator Harris.
Give Senator Harris just a quick moment for her audio to connect.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
We're fine, thank you.
Good. It's good to be with you. Thank you.
So could you please tell me, what can women do to be more involved in the political process, and where do you start?
Oh, where do we start? Well, let's start by, I will start by thanking the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, because part of it is creating a space where people have a network in which to work with each other, to ask questions, to inspire each other, and just to get out there and do things together. And being engaged is a number of things. It's about, one, knowing our network. So of course there is 100 Black Women, but there's the networks we have that are part of our family network, part of our friend network, part of our church network, part of our social organization network. And listening to folks about the issues that they talk about when you're sitting at their kitchen table, right? The things that concern them about their lives or their livelihoods, their children and their future. And then helping folks to see the connection between their priority issues and elections. Because I will tell you, elections matter. Elections matter. Who holds these most important offices will be the determinant about whether we are either going to support and push for expansion of the Affordable Care Act, like President Obama wants us to do, and Joe Biden together, they created the Affordable Care Act, or it's going to be having someone like the President of the United States who is trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act in the United States Supreme Court right now. What we want is, we want to remind people of the connection between what we need to do to build up and protect our small businesses, and knowing that especially during the course of this pandemic, up to 90% of minority-owned small businesses and women-owned small businesses did not get the benefit of the Paycheck Protection Program. And so we want to have people in elected office who know that we have to protect those businesses. They are part of the lifeblood of communities. And so helping people to see, if you will, the math between the issues that people run on and care about in terms of them being in elected office, and how that affects us in terms of the decisions they make. But I will tell you, this election coming up in November is without any question the most important election of our lifetime.
So we are talking about having more women follow in your footsteps. One of the biggest obstacles is fundraising.
Yeah.
What do you need to do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the things that, many of us were raised, and I'll speak for myself, I was raised to be an independent woman, which means you don't ask people for money. And then you run for office and you realize there's no way you can win without asking people for money. But what you have to remember is, you're not asking them for money for you. You're asking them to invest in the issues that you are championing that will help them. And so that is one part of it. But the other part of it is that it is difficult often for women, and in particular women of color and Black women, to raise money, because we don't necessarily have access to the networks that are about financial transactions. And so we have to grow that. And we also have to encourage our friends and our family members to understand that, at least until we have campaign finance reform, you cannot win most of these elections without raising the money that is necessary to get your message out, to get mail pieces out, to be on radio, to be on television. And so until we have campaign finance reform, a very significant part of being able to be a winning candidate is to raise enough money so you can get your message out and people can know that you're there, that you exist, and that you care about the issues they care about.
Well, we have three other people joining us today who want to ask questions, and I will remind all of our people on Facebook that we would like to hear your questions too to ask Senator Harris in a moment. We're joined by three prominent panelists. They are Lynette Bell, president of Truist Foundation Incorporated, and NCBW President's Corporate Advisory Council. Dr. Felicia Phillips, Master Business Strategist, CEO of PPICW Inc., and NCBW President's Corporate Advisory Council, and Ms. Xernona Clayton, Founder, President, and CEO of the Trumpet Awards Foundation Incorporated, NCBW honorary member, and only Xernona would have a face covering that has her picture on it, which I love about her. And she's also a fellow Californian for you. But let's start with Ms. Bell. You have the first question.
I believe Ms. Bell is having a little technical issue, please. If we can move on to the next.
Then we will move to our next questioner, Dr. Phillips.
Yes.
If you could ask the first question, Ms. Bell is having some technical issues.
No problem. Senator Harris, education is one of NCBW's initiatives. How do you feel about students returning to the classroom in the fall with COVID-19 cases spiking? What can legislators do to ensure the safety of students in the classroom, as well as ensuring that online students are able to access public school benefits such as tutoring or free lunches, breakfast? How do you feel about that?
It's a wonderful question, and it's challenging all parents right now. And so here's how I think about it. There are a lot of issues at play, right? First of all, let's start with what I think is a consensus. All parents want their children to go back to school, and they want them to be safe. And so it's a shared universal value that we want our children in school. The question becomes, in the midst of this pandemic that has taken over 130,000 lives, 136,000 lives, how can we do that and ensure that our children, their teachers, and the families of our children and the students and their teachers will be safe? So we have 98,000 public schools in America. Now, put that in the context of something that I talked a lot about even before the pandemic, which is over 90% of public school teachers come out of their own back pocket to help pay for school supplies. Okay? So until this pandemic is sufficiently handled, which is not going to be before the school year begins, the fall term begins, how can we possibly send our children to school and ensure that they're going to be safe? Well, let's talk about best practices. Wash your hands and wear a mask, right? Like our sister's doing right here. Okay. So wash your hands. Well, one of the things in a lot of the public schools is they have very few bathrooms. And one of the issues that has been discussed is constructing more hand washing stations in schools. That is billions of dollars if you're going to deal with 98,000 public schools in America. And I'm going to talk strictly about public schools because the private schools tend to have a very different setup in terms of what they can offer in terms of the resources to their students. But on the public school issue, there is the issue of masks and PPEs. Well, if we know that public school teachers are already coming out of their pocket to help pay for school supplies, one can imagine that it's reasonable to believe they'd have to come out of their pocket to then also pay for PPEs and to pay for the hand wipes and the Purell, what we can do to sanitize our hands. So where is the burden going to fall on providing the resources to actually construct the school setting in a way that our students can be safe? There is also the issue of, for our public school students, again, public transportation. So many of our public school students, the only way they're going to get to school is on public transportation. Well, we know that that's going to be an issue in terms of their safety. And when we're talking about safety, we're talking about their health safety, right? So there are a lot of things that we have to balance. We have to balance out the fact that we still do not have a national standard for testing in America. It is such a failure of leadership. So one might suggest, and there have been many educators who have suggested, well, one way to deal with sending all our kids back to school is let's have a national plan for testing all of our children, right, before they walk in the school. Well, here's the problem with that. Rapid testing. So what am I talking about? We right now, people are waiting a week or longer to get back the test results. So it will not achieve our goal to test all of the children, even if we had I think the estimate is somewhere around $5 to $15 billion to test all the kids. If we don't have rapid testing, it won't matter, because you can test that child on Monday, but if you don't have the test result until Friday or the following Monday, it's not going to help, right? And so these are the issues that are at play. To your point about at-home learning, it is estimated that 10 million at least of our children do not have access to the internet, or don't have access to technology that, even if they have broadband, would allow them to access broadband. And we know who those children are. There are children, they're Black and brown children, they're poor children who are missing significant portions of their educational process because they simply don't have access. So part of that has to be about a commitment to installing broadband as part of a national policy around building up the infrastructure of America, including broadband. Like generations ago, there was a national plan to make sure every house had electricity. We need to deal with that. We need to deal with the fact that if we are reopening in various states, many prematurely, by the way, but we got to get the economy going, of course. But what has to drive this conversation is what has caused the problem. The public health epidemic has caused the economic crisis. If we don't deal with the problem, which is the public health problem, we cannot sufficiently deal with the economic crisis. And that's what we're seeing in states around the country. So on that point, it has to be about saying that we're looking at, for example, working parents. And the issue of school. If parents, especially frontline workers, the majority of frontline workers are women and women of color and Black women, if they're going to work every day, it may be that they have to send their children back to school in unsafe conditions because they don't have any options, because we don't have affordable childcare for those parents. And so that's about pushing plans and pushing municipalities and state governments and the federal government to say, for our frontline workers, there should be paid and affordable childcare as a form of, if you will, hazard pay for those frontline workers who we have praised as essential workers, but we are treating as sacrificial workers. So these are the issues that are at play, and I strongly believe that we all agree with the value, and I know that our children should be in school, but the issue is at what cost?
Thank you.
And now we need to go back to Lynette Bell. She's joined us. She's with Truist. Lynette, your question, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Monica. Great to see you again. Senator Harris, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. My question to you was, in your opinion, was it efficient to reopen the states just to have them shut down again? And two-parter, do you think the economy was a priority over the general population's health? And what preventative measures should be put in place for the next spike of COVID, as well as the next rounds of reopening?
Yeah, thank you, Lynette. One of the problems that we are experiencing now is the problem is that we have had a failure of leadership at the top to have national standards. And so there's been this patchwork approach to addressing the issue. I mean, most recently, back to the last question about schools, the administration, the Trump administration, tried to shut down the CDC when they offered up their first draft of what should be happening around sending kids back to school, because there's been a politicization of it. They've been playing politics with the public health crisis. But to talk about how we got where we are, one of the issues is that there has not been a national focus, a nationwide standard that can at least be something, it does not have to be mandatory necessarily, but at least an agreed upon standard against which every local and state government can measure itself, and its people can measure their government against that national standard. So that's been part of the failing. There's no national standard for testing right now. There's no national standard for contract tracing right now. Contact tracing. We look again at the point about schools, and we have Betsy DeVos. You know, I could go on and on about the failures of her administration of the Department of Education. So what has to guide us? It has to be the public health professionals guiding us through what our best practices, because when we can contain this virus, other things can then happen. But when we can't contain the virus, as we have seen, we have to then we have to go backward in terms of things like opening back up economies. The public health experts have to guide us. We have to stick to an agreement that everyone should be wearing a mask when they are in public. The social distancing piece, the washing of the hands piece. These are just basic things that had there been more strict adherence to these best practices, and had there been uniform voices around national leadership about the priority around these practices, perhaps we would not be going backward as we clearly are as a country in just the last couple weeks.
All right, thank you. Now we'll go over to Xernona Clayton. Xernona, what question do you have for Senator Harris? And we love your mask.
Well, you know, this was done by a very famous Black artist, Cynthia St. James, who sent this to me, and I've been wearing it ever since. But Senator, you know we've been so proud of you for so long. That's why we had you here for the Trumpet Awards as an honoree. You brought us pride in everything you've done. And then when you went to the Senate, we said, oh no, there she is again. Thank you. Then we thought you were coming up again at the move we were hoping would work out, but maybe something still will. But it doesn't matter. We know that you're occupying a seat with your brains and your beauty and your ability to plan and reach people. You'll continue to make us proud. Now that's the statement. Now, I know you must have seen in Atlanta, well, in Georgia, we had a fiasco with voting. The machines malfunctioned and everything. But I was dancing in the streets because, you know, I worked with Dr. Martin Luther King, and one of my many jobs was to go and get those people out of bed on voting day. We couldn't get people to even consider getting up, even after we got the rights, when people had blood running down their faces, being beaten by people when they were just trying to register to get us the right to vote. Yeah. And we couldn't vote. And then on election day here in Georgia, it rained, I mean, it poured. And I was the happiest person. I was practically dancing in the streets because I was glad to see and hear them say, oh yes, I'm staying. I don't care about the rain. Yeah. I'm going to stay here until I vote. Now that was very encouraging. But I hope now that conditions haven't changed, what do you think we need to do to spark up the same verve and vitality? Because, you know, people have lost their jobs. People have gone through such adjustments because of what's happening to all of us. I hope they won't lose that vivacity to get up and get out, because I think more than ever, this vote will really be important. Do you have a recommendation for us to get them up and get them out again?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Ms. Clayton. You have, through your long-standing activism and leadership, you have paved the way for so many of us, including me, to be where I am now as only the second Black woman elected to the United States Senate. So I just want to first give you praise for all that you have done, and you keep staying active. I don't know where you get that energy, but you're always on the front line. So thank you. You know, the last big event actually that I attended before the pandemic struck was to to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis and my fellow members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we were there to commemorate Bloody Sunday, which, to your point, was another example of where folks were marching to fight for the right to vote and shedding blood in that fight to get there. And so I will tell you that one of the bills that I have is called the Vote Safe Act, and here's what it does. I'm saying that we should encourage the states to do three things: put in place vote by mail if they don't have it, to put in place early voting, which is that folks could vote at least 20 days before the election, so you can, it may be a sunny day that is convenient for you, or it may be a rainy day, but you have the choice to schedule it around your life. And the third thing is for those who can't do one or the other, or it's not available, and they have to go to the polls, that there would be safe voting at the polls, so things like curbside voting. And we would require states to put in place time limits, basically to say nobody should have to stand in line more than a certain number of minutes, as opposed to the hours that people have been standing in lines waiting to vote. And so I'd urge everyone on this convening to talk to your member of Congress and your senator to say pass the Vote Safe Act, so that we can make sure that folks are going to have options to vote and that they can be safe while they vote. Now, let me just say this also, in terms of the quick history on this issue. It is about what you did, Ms. Clayton, and Dr. King. It is about John Lewis and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It is about all of that, which was fighting against the laws that were in place to prohibit us from voting and to suppress the black vote. And then we had the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And we put in place laws to ensure that at least we could enforce the right kind of approach, which is to not suppress the vote. Then the United States Supreme Court in 2013 gutted the Voting Rights Act, took the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act when it passed a case called Shelby v. Holder. And right after that case in 2013 by the United States Supreme Court, around 24 states passed laws through their state legislature that were designed to suppress the vote. In North Carolina, the Court of Appeals said that that law that they passed in North Carolina was written with, and here's a quote, surgical precision to get black folks, to prevent black folks from voting. So we've had the classic voter suppression. On top of that, and I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, in 2016, Russian interference with the election of the President of the United States. And this is all public information from our intelligence community, which is that Russia engaged in a misinformation campaign, and part of their tactic was to focus on black voters and to basically turn people off from voting. So spreading misinformation so that folks would essentially say, you know what, that's too messy, I gotta go pick up my kids, I don't have time for that, right? Which is the functional equivalent of suppressing the vote. That's not going to go away. We're going to see that in 2020, a misinformation campaign, foreign misinformation campaign to suppress the vote. And we're in the midst of a pandemic. And so we as leaders, as community leaders, as leaders in our families and in our neighborhoods and in our church community, we have to remind people that there is a reason that all these people are setting up these obstacles to us to vote. And you know what it is? Because when we vote, things happen. And we make change. And we see progress. So what we have to do in this election coming up in 2020, one of the most important elections of our lifetime, is we need to remind everyone, don't let them play us. We will get our vote counted. We will honor the ancestors by voting by mail if voting by mail is an option for us. We will vote early, and we will get to the polls if that's our only option. But we must vote in this election, and we know the obstacles they've set up to prevent us or to deter us, but we will not be deterred.
Well, we have a couple of questions from some of those people who are online. And one of them asks, what practical steps can we put in place to ensure that our young people have a voice and are engaged in the electoral process? We cannot afford to isolate them.
I agree. The first thing is we have to listen to them. We cannot tell them how they should think or what they should do. We need to let them tell us what they want and what they need. Because I will tell you, one of the real sources of optimism for me is to see the kind of leadership that is coming out of our younger generations. You look at who has been leading the marches in the streets, and they of course stand on the shoulders of Ms. Clayton and so many others. And I think they know that they are carrying a baton that was passed to them by so many generations before them. But they are leading, and they are courageous, and they are bold, and they are not willing to yield to status quo and to hear that this is the way things have always been, therefore it's how it will be. So let's start by listening to them. Let's then also show them the connection between the issues they care about and things like an election. So one of the things that I talk a lot about is, look at where people are on a policy that relates to things like student loan debt. Our children, Black students, graduate with much higher student loan debt than other students. Let's support a candidate who has a policy, Joe Biden, I'm going to say his name, who has a policy about dealing with student loan debt. He's saying that he would, for those who have of a certain economic background, he would erase $10,000 of their student loan debt immediately. Let's look and let's talk to them about issues like the climate crisis. Our young people know that it is they who are going to pay the price if we don't act now. And let's talk to them about how an election can determine who makes decisions about whether we're investing in renewable energy and things like electric school buses, because at least before the pandemic, 25 million of our children go to school every day on those school buses, and they're inhaling those fumes, which is having an impact on their ability to learn. So who believes in an investment in renewable energies and things like electric school buses, which Joe Biden does, the goal would be until by 2030, they'd all be electric. Show them the connection between why we are shouting the name of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, because Black Lives Matter. And who is running for office has the ability, the willingness, the insight to speak those words and then do something about it, such as what we are proposing, which is the Justice and Policing Act, which I'm saying we need to have accountability and consequence for police officers who break the rules and break the law. I think these are the ways to get them engaged, but let us also, as their parents, as their aunties, let us also see their power, because they have got it. And this is, a wonderful generation of young leaders and activists, and I feel very optimistic if our future is in their hands, because they're not willing to give up. So.
Well, we've packed an awful lot into this very short amount of time, and we are very aware that you have a hard out coming up. So thank you, Senator Harris. And thank you, President Harris, for letting me moderate. There must be something magical about that name, Harris, and leadership.
Yeah. We're all related.
Madam President, giving it back to you.
Thank you. We have been fed this evening with information to encourage and empower us to continue to work the work of our founding leaders. As we have heard, it's a lot at stake for Black citizens in the upcoming presidential election. Blacks can't afford to be distracted from voting due to COVID-19. It is critical that our lives and our morals and our ethical obligation is to vote. Our ancestors were beaten, demoralized, and even died for the right to vote. We owe it to them and our children. We all should think about our footprint that we're leaving for the future. Senator Harris, esteemed panelists, Ms. Clayton, Ms. Bell, Dr. Phillips, Monica Kaufman Pearson, First Vice President Saritha Tinsley, Public Policy Committee, and all of the program participants to include Mr. Amos Jackson out of Senator Harris' office for working closely with NCBW. Thank each of you for delivering this paramount town hall meeting. I'm turning the remainder of the program over to our Public Policy Committee, which will be followed by our amazing moderator, Monica Pearson, to close us out.
Now is an opportunity for a call to action for everyone. It's your opportunity to participate in the change in our nation by registering to vote and encouraging at least 5 other individuals in your circle to register to vote and pass the word forward. A simple accountability. Be committed to keep abreast of yearly voting calendars within your state and nation, and the voting dates. Be an engaged and knowledgeable voter. Make sure you vote. Registering is just the first part. Know the elected officials who represent your districts and how they have voted on issues and bills. Write them and let them know your opinion on those bills and ask for what you would like in legislation.
Good evening, everyone. Contact your local state and federal elected officials by way of email, phone calls, and/or written communications, or all of the above. You need to be able to express your concerns. Knowledge is power. This next point is extremely important. Respond to your 2020 census. If you have not done so yet, or you know someone who has not done so, encourage them to do so. Your responses will definitely impact the services in your community. Let's not leave anything on the table. Some of the services that will be impacted are associated funds with hospitals, roads, schools, and healthcare. COVID-19 is still a critical concern and just might be a critical concern for quite some time. If you're working outside of your home, communicate to your employer your COVID-19 concerns regarding your safety and the safety of others. This is your right to be able to have a say in your safety. Also, be committed to following and insisting that your circle follows COVID-19 safety guidances also. The guidance is in place to protect you, your loved one, and others. And last but not least, use your voice. Contact your elected officials to advocate for funding, for initiatives, and/or programs that will foster optimum health for all of us. Be a voice, particularly for the underserved and the marginalized. Speak up and out for the rights of women and girls in the areas of health, education, and economic empowerment. Know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not a privilege. It is your constitutional right. Make sure it is being executed. Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments. I hope you've enjoyed this town hall meeting as much as I have, and that you've learned something from it, and that you will spread the word to others about what you learned today. Don't forget to fill out that census form. Don't forget to talk to our young people about registering to vote. If you have a runoff in your area, don't forget to stand in line. And don't forget, you can always early vote. Ask for an absentee ballot. The most important thing that I heard from Senator Harris is that we all must be involved in the development of our republic. So this concludes the NCBW Town Hall. To stay abreast of all of the initiatives, please visit www.ncbw.org. Again, www.ncbw.org. Thank you for being with us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.